horizontal like this. It doesn't flow vertical. Okay, so I've added a few more little things here, and in a minute I'm going to put some trees. Well, let's go ahead and put the trees in right now while the paper's still wet so that you can see how that works. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my paper back upside down, and I'm going to tilt it, not tilt it all, I'm tilting it probably at a 45-degree angle because I want the trees about that tall. If I wanted them taller, I'd tilt it and let the paint run down. This is so much fun. I'm going to add in some darker foliage. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm adding in darker foliage. I'm actually filming it myself with my iPad, so I have to remember to turn my board up. Okay, I'm got my cobalt blue mixed up. I can even add a little bit of Viridian to that for a darker green. Have all kinds of different colors of green. Don't just have one variety. And this is foliage down here too. I'm forgetting what I'm doing. So I need to paint that shape because that's also foliage. It's like a little island there, but it's got trees on it. I'm going to leave a little white edge though. Just about forgot to. I just about covered it up. So sometimes you have to remind yourself and draw extra lines. Do you see how I'm putting the blue in and it's maybe the wrong color or too cobalt, so I can just go right on my paper and add in another color. You see how I'm barely teasing the paper. I don't want to keep stroking it over and over and over until it's dry now, because that makes it not look fresh. Alright, while it is wet, what I'm going to do is turn it back upside. Do you see how that looks like foliage in the background now? Some trees back there? Okay, while it's wet, I'm going to take my palette knife, and I'm going to use this one. Somebody took off with my good one last week, one of my students, and they'll bring it back though because they didn't mean to take it. So anyway, I'm going to hold my palette knife, I'm going to put my thumb on it right there on the edge, and I'm going to do some trees trunks. But I don't want them to go out. I don't want to put them this way because that'll take them out of the picture plane. So I want to scrape them, and I'm going to have to put this against me because I got to bear down. I'm going to scrape them this way, because I want them to kind of lean towards the focal point. And I'm going to do some high and some low, because then they look like they have perspective. I'm going to show you in a minute, but I kind of have to hold this against me to get a... I've done more than I probably should, but I just wanted to show you how they are. Do you see them? Those scrapes are tree trunks that are showing up, and we're going to paint behind them in a minute. Do you see how the paint mingled into the sky right here along the edge? Do you see that along the edge? And made a really pretty little tree shape, leaf shape. The edges are real important when you're painting, and sometimes we forget about the edges. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm always thinking what is dry and what can I paint. I noticed right here that I got a bloom in the water. So if I don't like that, it might look like in the ocean it might look like a wave, but I'm going to just take my wet paper towel, and I'm going to have to put it down here just a second, and I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm just going to barely rub on it, and what it does is it kind of rubs it out. And now I can take my, I don't know if this will work, because sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. I'm going to paint over it just a little bit. Sometimes I get really cool looking water things when I don't even try, because even though I've been painting 25 years, I forget what the paint does sometimes. You just have to paint a lot, and sometimes you get a keeper, and sometimes you get one that really surprises you. It'll be great, and you didn't even do anything. Okay, so here we've painted around that bloom, and it's not so noticeable. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this big shape right here. I'm not thinking of it really as a tree or a cliff or whatever, but I'm going to paint it green. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, usually I start with some undercolor of yellow. If you want the yellow to show through, in watercolor you have to paint light to dark. And then, see, I'm just going right through my people because I can't paint around those little people. When it dries, then I'll paint in and give them some shape. But if you notice I've painted that whole section yellow, you don't have to always do it like that. That's just the way I did it just now. It's a reaction to what I'm doing. So when you paint, it's an active process. You can't always predict what you're going to do. Sometimes people do they do things over and over and over, and they always predict the same way. I just like it to be a surprise sometimes. Okay, now I'm going to paint this big landmass. And I don't want to paint it all the same color. And I'm just going, do you see how I'm just barely putting the green in and it's starting to mingle? Because it's wet. This is called wet on wet. And so I'm just mingling that color in. Okay, maybe I might like a few little scrapes on this to look like trees too. So I could, I've actually got a different palette knife this time. See, this one's shaped differently. You can use a credit card if you don't have a palette knife. I'll just do some little scrapes. This palette knife is not working as well. I don't usually use that one, but mine disappeared. All right, so I'll use this other one. Oh, I got a bigger trunk. See, sometimes some of them make bigger marks. Just depends. But there's some trees on that island now, because it would be boring if it were just, you know, just a flat shape. And maybe I took a picture and it's just a tree with no trees on it. That doesn't mean some trees couldn't grow later, or that I might want some trees on it. I just like to scrape. I think it's fun and it's good practice, so give yourself a few little scrapes. Okay, now we've got also this big landmass up here that we've got to do something with. So while we're waiting for this other to dry, and we don't even have to wait for it to dry, we could go in now, but I'm just trying to show you how to move around in your painting. That's what I like to do, is paint around. Let's just paint this kind of a greenish color too. If we wanted to, we could have made it look like sand if we were at the beach or whatever and left it white. And okay, I'm just mingling some color in. Do you see how I'm just barely touching it? And this is the foreground. The foreground's usually darker and the background is lighter. So I probably should go in with a really dark color just to teach you to paint the foreground darker. So let's add some of that Viridian, and let's add a little bit of our cobalt blue together, and let's even add a touch of the permanent rose. That's sort of a reddish color. Your permanent rose is a good color because it's transparent, and when you mix it with the green, it keeps the Viridian from being so bright. Okay, because they're complements. So do you see how I'm just touching and letting the color mingle? I'm not stroking, pawing at it. If you paw at it, it's going to start getting overworked looking. And then maybe I'll take my toothbrush that I got out of my husband's bathroom. I'm just teasing, I really didn't. My sweet husband, Big Ben. Okay, I'm going to mix up some green, and I'm going to mix up some yellow with it. And I'm going to spatter. And the reason I'm doing that is to add a little bit of texture down here because it's kind of boring. So I'm going to go like that and just spatter a little bit. You see how I'm just raking some people like to tap it on a brush, but and then if you get it where you don't want, you could put a shield up, but I don't have time for that. So I just wipe it out very quickly and let it go. I might add some flowers or something to that in a minute, but as you can see, it's got a little bit of texture down here. And if you're a beginner, there's a whole lot to do initially, so we're just not going to worry about that foreground. You could also add some big weeds. See, I can scrape in. See how they're bigger? Because it's in the foreground. So, and I might paint some flowers around that or something in a minute. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Okay, so we've got this now. The next thing we can do is we can go in. We could paint the people, but I'm scared that this is not dry yet. And I can use a hair dryer and blow it dry around the people if I want to. But I'm just going to wait because I've still got some work to do in the background. So what I'm going to do is go back with these trees, and I'm going to stop this and I'm going to record again because sometimes it won't let me record the whole thing.